Okay, let's see. Welcome back, and let's see how you did. Hopefully, you had time to find the answers to these and fill them in on your lecture guide. So, classification of butterflies, starting with domain. Domain, eukaryote, of course. Kingdom, Animalia. Phylum, Arthropoda. Subphylum, Hexapoda. Let's see, kingdom, phylum, class, Insecta. And order, drumroll, Lepidoptera. Got it? There you go. Hopefully you feel very intelligent being able to classify a butterfly from the domain to the order level. Remember, on your quiz coming up, you will have to know 3 different orders of insects, including one of your choice. All right, I'll move this quickly. I'm assuming you've seen this before in grade school. We'll talk about the insect life cycle briefly. There's 2 types of metamorphosis. One is complete, and the stages go egg, larva, pupa, adult, and the other type is incomplete, which the stages go egg, nymph, adult. Now I'll show you the same thing, but with pictures. So here we have complete metamorphosis with egg, larva, pupa, adult, incomplete with egg, nymph, adult. So one thing hopefully that you'll notice is that a nymph looks pretty much exactly like an adult, but in miniature. So when the little nymphs emerge from the eggs, they are just miniature versions of the adult. On the other hand, when the larvae emerge from an egg, they look completely different from the adult. And they usually have different feeding habits and sometimes even different habitats. Some moths and butterflies, they have different larval stages, which we call instars. I'll let you read on your own about the benefits of insects while you're working through your study guides, and make sure you know diseases that are transmitted by insects. When you read about these, some of these should sound familiar because we covered some of these when we looked at the protist. Now, before we go on to our last phylum, I will go back and pull up the Chelicera slide. All right, so remember when we started phylum Arthropoda, I said that there are 3 major divisions, and the first one I talked about were the Chelicera forms. And I said the Chelicera forms, which were the arachnids and their relatives, they all had 8 legs and chelicera. So what are chelicera? If you said fang-like structures, you were correct. So here is a diagram of a spider, and here are the chelicera. Yikes. And you'll notice what's attached there are the poison gland. So yeah, you want to be very careful around arachnids. You don't want to bite. This is used to hunt, to sting, to paralyze their prey. Now, a student asked me today, well, why aren't all arachnids, why aren't all spiders poisonous to us? And if you think about it, for instance, one arachnid, a daddy longleg, their venom is very, very poisonous, but we don't have to worry about daddy longleg bites at all, and that's because their chelicera are unable to penetrate the human skin. So while we have this spider pulled up, let's look at some of the parts. Here we have many eyes of the spider, and the eyes are connected to the brain. And this is true of all animals. Your eye is actually considered to be an extension of your brain. And then we have a nerve cord, and notice what side of the animal it runs along. Do you remember what side is this? This is review vocabulary from chapter 32. The back side is the dorsal side of the animal, and the bottom or stomach side is the ventral side. So this nerve cord runs along the ventral side of this arachnid. And if you go back and look at the diagram of the grasshopper I had pulled up earlier, another arthropod, you'll also notice that the nerve cord runs along the ventral side. All right, if we want to look at the digestive tract, we have the mouth here, sort of a convoluted, here's some stomachs, digestive tract, and again, it has its anus at the opposite end. All right, this is one thing I want you to think about right now. When we talked about plants evolving from their aquatic habitat to terrestrial habitat, I said there were 3 obstacles, 3 evolutionary obstacles they had to overcome in adapting from aquatic to terrestrial life. So think in your mind right now, what were they? Hopefully you remember plants had to overcome the problem of dehydration, avoiding dehydration, the problem of support, and the problem of doing sexual reproduction outside a watery environment. Sperm got to swim, right? Well, what we'll see is the animals pretty much had the same obstacles. Now, let's look at the problem of dehydration. We look at flatworms, platyhelminthes, and mollusks. Now, how do they overcome the problem of avoiding dehydration? Well, it's simple. They just stay in moist environments. Flatworms, they either, like the planaria, they're either underneath rocks right by a little creek or stream, or tapeworms, they're inside your body. So again, flatworms, they are in a watery environment. Snail slugs, they can't dry out, they'll die. But arthropods, one reason they're so successful is their, drumroll, their exoskeleton. Their exoskeleton helps them avoid dehydration, and they colonize all sorts of landscapes. It doesn't matter if water is nearby or not. Now let's review a little bit more for your quiz. Why did a flatworm need to be flat? And the answer was so that oxygen could diffuse into every cell of the body. And oxygen, it needs a moist membrane to diffuse across. So with animals like planaria, it diffuses right in. If you think about yourself, you have lungs. Oxygen diffuses across the moist lining of your alveoli, the sacs in your lungs. And when we get to salamanders, again, they have a moist skin, and the skin is actually the major respiratory organ of salamanders. Now, here's the problem. The exoskeleton oxygen is not going to diffuse across this hardened exoskeleton. So one thing you observed in arthropods are respiratory organs. And in the arachnid here, in the little spider, we see a book lung. So again, characteristic of arthropods is respiratory organs. If you go back and look at that diagram of the grasshopper, you are going to see trachea. So I think that's all I have to say. Again, once again, you'll notice the heart, open circulatory system. One thing that is about on a spider are the little spinnerets and silk gland. All right, so what we are going to do now, hopefully, is finish off the chapter 33 in the invertebrates. All right, the last phylum that we're going to cover from chapter 33 are the echinoderms. So this literally means the spiny-skinned animals. So do you recognize this? Old name, starfish. Politically correct. According to the biology PC police, this is now a sea star. So we have a sea star. This is a brittle star. This is a sea cucumber. This is a crinoid. I believe it's also called a feather star. All right, sea urchins are also included in phylum Echinodermata. All right, so as I said, echinoderms, it literally means spiny kids, spiny skinned animals, sea stars, etc. So these are usually slow-moving or sessile marine animals, and we all know what sessile means by now. It's hard to look at these and think, wow, that's an animal. That is an animal. All right, look at where we are. We are finally in the bilaterans in the clade deuterostomes. So let's take it from the top. Echinoderms. Do they have no tissues, like sponges, or true tissues? Well, of course, they have true tissues. Symmetry, radial bilateral. Stifle your urge to say radial because they are in the clades bilateran. And when we look at a sea star diagram, I'll show you why the symmetry is really bilateral. Well, of course, if it's a bilateran, we know it's triploblastic. Does it have a coelom? Yes, it does. Is the echinoderm, does it have protostome development or deuterostome? Well, we are in the clade of deuterostomes. It has deuterostomic development. So when you're reviewing for your quiz this weekend, remember from chapter 32, characteristics of deuterostome development. Remember, the mouth forms second. The anus forms first. So the first opening, the first hole in the gastrula, which again is called the blastopore, that will become the organism's anus. The mouth is the second opening, forms second. All right, radial cleavage. You can look at a picture of this in your textbook, which would probably be better than what I can draw. We'll try this real quickly. So in radial cleavage, so we have our zygote and we have our cleavage division. So we have the 2-cell stage and we have the 4-cell stage, and we 8-cell stage would cut this in half. Now notice that this top cell top cells are directly above the lower cells. But in spiral cleavage, it's sort of like bricks. All right, so if these were two cells here, the cells here would be like this. All right, so deuterostomes have radial cleavage. Please look at the book pictures, much better than my drawings. And indeterminate cleavage, which means the fate of these cells is not yet determined. I could remove a cell from a developing embryo and the larva or the juvenile would still be just fine, would just be okay. All right, what you should know about echinoderms is they are characterized by a water vascular system. This is unique in this phylum. So it's really cool. They have these little water canals and they have these little tube feet at the bottom. And part of the water vascular system is this little pore called the madreporite, and it's right up here. Now, remember, sea stars do have a complete digestive tract. They have a mouth and an anus. Where's its mouth? Well, its mouth is on the other side, its ventral side. You can't see the mouth. And here's the anus right here, so it's this really, really short little digestive tract. But off-center of the anus is this little hole, the madreporite, which is part of the water vascular system. And this is exactly why starfish, even though they appear to have radial symmetry, do not have radial symmetry. So if we use my little trick, if we put our starfish on a pie and we slice it up for friends, if you slice up your pie like this, you're not going to have a little madreporite in each piece of pie. So the sea star, to be politically correct, does not have radial symmetry. But if you slice it right through this pore and right through this arm, you have mirror images left and right halves. So the sea star does have bilateral symmetry. And more obvious, the larvae are bilaterally symmetrical. All right, do any of you know the function of the water vascular system? I'll just tell you. The functions of the water vascular system, they help the starfish with locomotion and with feeding, and gas exchange actually too. So they do help with locomotion. One thing that sea stars feed on are clams, and so what they will do, they will use these sea stars to basically open up a clam. I'll try to find a video of this. It's really cool because clams and oysters, they survive by keeping their shells closed. And they have a really, really strong adductor muscle inside that keeps the two halves of the clam close together when it's under attack. Well, the starfish will latch on from the outside, and with its little tube feet, well, this is a terrible drawing of a sea star, but with its little tube feet, they will pull and pull and pull the shells, and they just pull apart just a little bit so that the oyster opens up just a little crack. And this is sort of the weirdest, grossest thing. The starfish then inverts its stomach into the clam or the oyster, and its digestive enzymes just take over and digest the animal inside. I'll try to look for a video on that. All right, one thing you can notice is the separate sexes. Or you can't really see that, but they do have gonads and they're either male or female. All right, here's a little extra credit game. You can just send me the email and see if you can figure out what these capital letters stand for. When you figure out the answer, just send me an email. There you go. It summarizes the animal kingdom. All right. This is when you are finished with this, I would finish study guide 33 and I would do the little game I have linked in the worksheet to help you study for your quiz. Hope you enjoyed the invertebrates, and what's next is the vertebrates.